Hello, BookTube. I have another TBR TBR for you. Those of you who are new to the channel, first of all, welcome. It's just this tedious all the time. This is the thing that I'm doing where I'm going back to the very beginning of my channel. It's an enormous number of videos, thousands of videos, and to be mindful of that, and maybe to create a playlist if I can figure out how to do that. I'm going back to the beginning of my channel and talking about, sort of giving a retrospective on all the new books that I've received over the years, since I'm not really getting massive mail hauls anymore of printed copies. I'm still fairly awash in review copies. Again, those of you who are new, I am a book reviewer, so that's why I'm talking about it. But they're not coming in the mail, right? Because there's nobody in the shipping departments of publishing houses. There are no publicists at their offices. They're all working from home. So they're dealing in PDFs and watermarked copies, but they're not sending out massive mountains of printed books. Maybe that day will come again, in which case maybe I'll forestall these TBRs. But in the meantime, we're going through everything that we've seen so far. And where I go through the list, talk about it a bit, and then give you a pick from the list, the thing that stood out to me the most over time. And we're up to number 9. This is TBR TBR number 9, and I'm watching these videos again, sometimes for the first time, and noticing that it's this batch of videos that really was the first time where I was just routinely opening mail packages on camera. I'd done it a little bit before this, but this is where I'm starting to view it as just a fixed thing that I had worried originally years ago. I remember I had worried that I couldn't open packages during a mail haul because it would take too long. It'd be a whole bunch of dead air of me just wrestling with packages, but it turns out it doesn't take that long at all. So I just fell into the habit, and I fell into that habit as a habit, really, with these books. And also, as usual, I'm mentioning this in every video, but it's also rather touching that I'm seeing my old girls, my old dogs in these videos. They've been gone for a long time now. It just seems impossible to me to believe that I could live without Lucy. I could live without my Basset Hound. And yet, here I am. I am living with a totally different kind of dog, and they've been gone for years now. That is weird. Very weird. But anyway, we'll go through the list here and we'll see what we make of it. So the first two things on the list here are Norton critical editions. I don't have one right to hand here. I usually have one that I'm reading at the moment, but not right now. A lot of you will know them from school, from college. They are the primary text, the text that is being reprinted, some canonical text. And then the back half of the book is secondary material, historical sources, original criticism, book reviewer reactions, that sort of thing. And then moving forward with academic essays and interpretations and whatnot. They're very, very good books. There are footnotes all throughout the text itself, and then you get that barrage of supporting essays in the back. And in this, I got Norton critical editions of Candide and Jude the Obscure, both of which were really good. I really liked the Jude book, the selections of the critical essays for the Jude book. The only subdued part of it all is that neither Candide nor Jude the Obscure is really a favorite book of mine. So although I got them, I was happy to have them, I was happy to read them, I don't think I kept either one of them. The next one is, I believe, a debut novel. It was a big, boisterous novel, whether it was a debut or not, called Night of the Animals by Bill Broun. That starts off fairly low-key with a lunatic who believes that he's on a divine mission to free the animals in the London Zoo. But it gets much more complex after that, surreal for long parts, and I thought it was tremendously good, tremendously impressive. I don't think I've ever seen it as a paperback. I don't think I've ever seen the hardcover again. I don't think I've ever seen this book other than the one time that I got an advanced copy, and then I got a finished copy in the mail. Got rid of both of them. But I don't think I've ever seen it in a bookstore, even when, back when bookstores were open and I was going to them all the time. And I believe that Night of the Animals made it to the all-important Steve Reed's list. I do a year-end list of books, the year's best and worst, fiction and non-fiction. I've been doing it for a very long time, and despite any kind of pandemic or anything else, I'm going to do it this year as well. I believe that Night of the Animals made it onto the best debut list for that year. Then we have historical novel, a big fat historical novel, Katherine of Aragon, by the historian Alison Weir, who decided to embark on a 6-book fictional project where she writes a huge historical fiction about each of the wives of Henry VIII. And this is the one, of course, that started with Katherine of Aragon, who was first Henry's brother Arthur's wife. And then Arthur dropped off the twig, and the Henry VII had to go. He had an heir and a spare. He had to go from his heir to his spare to young Prince Henry, who was probably going to be a bishop, if you can imagine that. He was probably destined for the church if his brother had become King of England, but instead, he married Katherine, and they were happily married for a long time, but she was not producing any boy heirs who lived. Some of them, she had male children, but they tended to die heartbreakingly very early, or were born stillborn. And this is not the first, nor the 10th, nor the 100th, nor the 1000th, probably, novel about Katherine of Aragon. And it's fairly cautious. I mean, it's good and textured. I believe I reviewed it. I think I reviewed it for... That's going to be a problem with these TBR TBRs, is that I review in a lot of places, and I don't always have a steel trap memory for where a review appeared. Like, for instance, I remember writing a review of this book. I remember that part of it just fine, but where it showed up, I think it was the Christian Science Monitor. Pretty sure. Then the next book is The Apache Wars by Paul Andrew Hutton. Big history of the United States military fighting against, often losing to, and eventually just wearing down and conquering the Apache Nation. And I don't think I had read it when it popped up on this original video from 2016, but I have since read it. I believe it made the Steve Reed's end of the year list for one of the best works of history of that year. Very good, solid work. Then We Are Unprepared by Meg Little Reilly, which is a climate change novel. It's a novel about a gigantic superstorm. I read it, and then, of course, in the years since, we have seen superstorms, and this book is fairly good, fairly sharp and prescient in terms of what some of the after effects of such a big storm would be like. I'm worried that we might be in for a season of superstorms this year, of super hurricanes this year. As I mentioned that in an earlier video, in a Q&A video, I said one of the things that I worry about every year is the hurricane season. The waters of the breeding grounds of hurricanes have been extra warm. That's what breeds hurricanes, and that's what feeds them. That's what allows them to grow big, and they draw from hot surface water. And a couple of people emailed me and said, well, then I guess I better batten down the hatches for Hurricane Sandy, for a superstorm. I better do that, just in case that happens. And I wanted to point out that that hurricanes don't work on a timetable, and they're not part of a union. There's absolutely nothing, meteorologically speaking, there's absolutely nothing to stop there from being 20 Category 5 hurricanes this summer. Imagine a week where Hurricane Sandy hit on Monday, Tuesday, then Thursday, and then Saturday of the same week in the same place. There's nothing to stop that from happening. People would look at that and say, well, no, you hurricanes are breaking the rules, but the weather doesn't work that way. And the water that we're talking about here has never been so warm in modern times. So, but aside from that, We Were Unprepared was not exactly memorable fiction-wise, and that's an endemic problem on this list, as you're going to see. Like, the next book is First Strike by Ben Coes, which is a thriller. There's also The One Man by Andrew Gross, which is a historical, but still a thriller. There's, isn't there another one on here? Die of Shame by Mark Billingham. Those are all thrillers, and they're all very competently done, but not in the least bit memorable. Then we have Against Everything by Mark Greif, which is a nonfiction work, a collection of gripes and rants that none of them really hit home for me. Also, again, not very memorable. Then let's see here, Razor Girl by Carl Hiaason, which is sort of very lightly adapted from a headline-grabbing news story in Florida, but it's the typical Carl Hiaason, where he sets a fairly headlong plot in motion and then fills it with jokes and great sarcastic character sketches that all really work. I mean, Razor Girl it's the occupation of an hour to read, but it is a very refreshing comic novel, and that, I guess, is no small thing, right? Not many authors can't do that. And again, I believe I reviewed Razor Girl. I want to say it was for the Christian Science Monitor, but it may have been for somebody else. It may have been for the Washington Post. I'll try to find. But if I don't find, or if I get distracted, or if I forget, as I've said many times on this channel, if you want to know if I've reviewed a book, just go to Google, type in my first and last name, and then type in the name of the book, and that will probably give you the result, although not always. Let's see here. Oh, the next one is The Nixed by Nathan Hill, his big, fat debut novel, and as far as I know, his only novel so far. Big debut novel, very ambitious, a character study, first of all, of sibling-parent relationship, but also about social protests and the change in social norms. The type of swing for the fences subject matter and world that debut novelists tend to get. They tend to go for that sort of thing. They want to make their mark early. They don't want to write a small novel. And The Nixed is very good. Very, very good. This is one that I have seen. I've seen it remaindered in bookstores. I've seen the paperback many times. I've had the paperback a couple of times. I don't think I have a copy now. And I believe, once again, that it made the Steve Reed's list, which is the only list that matters. It's the only one that counts for these year-end assessments. That's all that matters. No literary prizes, no newspaper or magazine literary roundups, just mine. And I think it made the list for best debut. Then we have Gods of the Morning by John Lister-Kaye, which is it's a natural history about this guy turned his estate into a nature preserve, a minor nature preserve, and just spent eons of time watching the animals without any disruption, without any interruption from the outside world. And I love books like that, absolutely love it. This one was really, really good. Very acute watcher of birds. Then we have an intense frustration, a slim novel called Moonstone by, I don't know how you pronounce this author's pretentious one-word name, Sjon. I have no idea how you pronounce that, and I don't want to know, because Moonstone was terrible. Just terrible. And terrible on so many levels. I believe it made the Steve Reed's list of the worst fiction of the year. I don't usually do that to young novelists, but this was just awful, just terrible. Full of scabrous self-loathing, full of stigmatizing gay sensibilities, gay life, gay sex, full of just ridiculous, move it around at random cardboard characters that aren't anything, that don't come to anything, and with an ending that makes no sense at all. An ending that I'm sure the author and his hothouse flower coffee house group of enablers thought was the cleverest thing in the world, but it doesn't make any sense at all. And that's not just me saying, oh, well, it wasn't a Foursquare, Anthony Trollope ending. The gimmick at the end of the book is nonsense. The whole thing is nonsense. And when you dig below it, of course, because it is tortured gay fiction, it has been showered with praise, and that is just a travesty. It's just a travesty that fourth-rate, unrevised crap like this is being given that kind of treatment. We've seen it. I could name other authors that I have named many times on this channel, and I don't know what to do about it. Obviously, there's nothing I can do about it except point it out critically, but I don't know why. I don't know what it is that all of a sudden, in the last 10 years, gay fiction has become so incredibly needy that it has to praise these fourth-weight, flyweight non-entities and their crappy books. Instead of... Anyway, they don't always do it. Sometimes really good gay novels are praised, so I should count my blessings. And then the last is a work of history, World War II history, The Kamikaze Hunters by Will Iredale. They have very good premise, but it didn't really gel, I guess, is the annoying critical terminology. It didn't really gel as a book, as a work. The premise is incredibly dramatic, because kamikaze fighters in World War II were bewildering to Westerners, to Western fighters. The idea that Western fighters would do it, but they would do it if they had a set goal in mind. It wasn't just a routine part of the mission that you were going to die. It was, well, we're on a mission, it's gone south, and if I don't sacrifice my life, my squad mates are going to die, or maybe be captured, rather than as a modus of my behavior, I am going to die. That I guess I wanted more of it. I've read books on this subject and adjacent subjects to it that worked much better. So that was a long list of books, but not many that really stand out. A lot of the fiction here fails completely. For instance, the bean of the batch, the best book here is the Apache Wars. Absolutely essential reading. For instance, if you are an American history buff, then it's essential reading. If you are a military history buff, it's essential reading. And also, if you like to read about the long history of social injustices perpetrated by the American government in the name of a certain slice of the American populace, well, this is a big one. the American government's treatment of the original inhabitants of this continent, the people that the land was stolen from, is a long tapestry of horrible crimes. And at the heart of the Apache Wars, it wouldn't have been Apache Wars if those crimes hadn't been at the heart of the story. And the author does a really good job. It's not just that it's an important subject, it's that the author does a really good job. So it gets, I'm pretty sure I've recommended it a few times since I opened it on camera, but I'm happy to recommend it again. You should have this book. I don't, at the moment, have a copy of it, and I don't know if I'm blurbed on the paperback. I don't think I've ever seen a paperback of it. I don't think I've seen a paperback of many of these. I'm always curious to know if I've been blurbed on a book, because I don't often get paperbacks, and I don't often check. That's the thing. In the last 4 years, if I had been, or in the last 15 years, if I had been going into bookstores and routinely checking, but I tend not to do that. In bookstores, I tend to, new bookstores, retail bookstores, I tend to zero in on, new science fiction mass market paperbacks, new romance mass market paperbacks, the magazine section. I don't tend to go into the history section or the fiction section and just pull down every book that I've reviewed. I don't even remember half the time how many of them I've reviewed or where or whether or not. But one way or another, whether I'm blurbed on it or not, I still strongly recommend it. What a book. Oh my. So that's it. That is TBR TBR number 9. We'll go on to number 10 later on this week on Thursday and see how many more old memories we can rake up. Thank you, BookTube.